We'll discuss today is, as it's mentioned in the email that was circulated, is the topic of the relationship between Yacov and Rachel. In Hebrew, it's Yacov and Rachel, and this was a topic that is also mentioned in Chumash, in Genesis, in the beginning, in one of the first Torah portions, that Yacov told his father-in-law Lavan that I'm going to work for Rachel 7 years, and that I want to marry Rachel. So there's an interesting discourse, Chassidic discourse, that discusses the relationship, the interest that Yacov had in Rachel, in Rachel, in the way that he invested an additional 7 years to work for her, and in addition to that, also describing the attributes of who Yacov represents, the attribute of who Rachel is, and the attribute of Lavan. Although here he was a very sly person, but up there he had a very high root. And in addition to that, also the concept of what does it mean, beauty, which is basically the descriptions of the qualities of Rachel. Yefei Teyar v'Yefei Mara, that she had both qualities. Yefei Teyar means her features, everything was in proportion, symmetrical, and it was also Yefei Mara, complexion, that this is something that is, these two qualities are mentioned uniquely by Rachel, and not by the other matriarchs. By the other matriarchs, you only find sometimes one of them. We find either it was Yefei Teyar or Yefei Mara, or it was the features, the facial features were the proportion one to another, or they were actually the complexion, the reflection on the face, but not both together. So this discourse is from the second Rabbi of Chabad, and his name is Rabbi Dov Ber. He was the one that actually said this discourse. It's a very long discourse. We're just going to make an outline of the flow of the discourse in order to give us a clear picture of what exactly was the interest of Yacov in Rachel, on a spiritual level, of course. It begins that it says Yacov loved Rachel. So the Chassidic discourse begins, the Rabbi of Chabad begins and asks the question, what is this praise that he loved Rachel for her looks? It's known that our patriarchs and our matriarchs are basically a reflection of the attributes above. They were considered a heavenly chariot to the higher spheres, to the higher attributes. And therefore, the same thing also is in relationship to our matriarchs, to our imois. The ovis, our patriarchs are referred to mountains, our matriarchs are referred to hills. Horim ugvois. So the first question that he asks is, why is it that we see by Rachel different facts than we see by the other matriarchs? We don't see it by Leah, we don't see it by Rivka, we don't see it by the other matriarchs, the different qualities, unique qualities, how Rachel is described. In addition to that, the question is, why Rachel? Why did he want Rachel and not Leah? And even if he did want Rachel because he loved Rachel, so the question is, we don't look at the looks as Shlomo Melech, as the King Shlomo says in Mishli, in the parables, in his book of parables in chapter 31, Sheker Achein v'Hevel Hayefi, that charm and beauty is not considered really the substance. It is Yiras Hashem, it is the fear of Hashem that is based as solid. And as the Rebbe explains a very interesting fact, that then the external looks, the looks of the person, have a meaning. Once they're filled also with a background of a spiritual substance, fear of the Almighty, so then the looks also have a substance, a significance, and are unique. And then the question is, why did he have to work 7 years? What does the number 7 signify here? So the Michoel Rebbe begins explaining. We refer to the one that said this discourse as the Michoel Rebbe, the middle Rebbe. because he was the son of Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He was known to say discourses for 16, 17 hours. I'm not going to keep you here all night, but he wrote so quick that when he wrote the 60th line on a page, the first one was still wet. It says that sometimes when there was no paper right on the pad, he would just write on the table. And when he was nostalgic, when he passed away, there was a fire, and that table also burned.
Wow.
He was a person that was completely removed from this physical world and physical aspects of world. I mean, he didn't even recognize the value of a coin, monetary coin in where he lived. It was completely, his whole mind was completely on a higher level. I mean, his meditation was to such an extent that one of his mishorsim, one of the people that would take care of that would just be a secretary, whatever, didn't seem like to be a smart person. So he says, you want to see the Rebbe now? I'll show you the Rebbe. Here, I'll turn him around for you. The Rebbe was in the middle of meditation. He was completely not in this world. So he says, I'll turn him around. He says, what are you doing? He says, he doesn't know the difference. He's not here now. And that's what happened. He turned him around, and Michoel was in a different world. So this is the one that gave us this discourse. So the Michoel Rebbe says, to introduce it, we need to introduce what do the Ovis and Imois, what do our forefathers, what do our patriarchs and matriarchs symbolize? They symbolize the higher spheres of the world of Atzilus, the higher attributes of Atzilus. In Atzilus itself, you have two different groups. You have a group that is giving, the givers, and you have the receivers. One is called Mashpia, one is called Mekabel. One is giving, one is receiving.
What is Atzilus?
In Atzilus itself,
What is Atzilus?
Atzilus is the world that is the highest of a group of four worlds to which we group them together. It is called Atzilus. The first one, Lashon Eitzel, it's closer, it's higher up in the spiritual sense. There's no higher up there because there's no space, no physical space there. And then there is Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, these are the lower worlds. But basically, Atzilus is the first one after the infinite worlds that is existing with the attributes existing as revelations and vessels, one containing the other. The vessels are containing the revelations. This is called Elam HaAtzilus. It's a world for itself. It's considered also infinite, but it's the first one already outside of the infinite worlds where worlds are starting to become more limited. And that is Bria, is the first world which is considered created, but it's not even created. There's no creation there yet. There's only the heavenly angels. This is called Bria, the potential for being. Then there's Yitzira, which is the form and design, the structure, and then comes Asiya, the final touch. So this is basically four worlds, and they are also in a person's soul. It refers to the Chochma. Atzilus represents Chochma, Bria represents Bina, Yitzira represents the emotions, and Asiya represents Malchus, the attribute of Malchus, which is the speech, thought, speech, and deed, which is in every person's soul.
Are we in the last world?
We are in this lowest world, not only in Asiya, but we're in Asiya Hagashmi, the physical Asiya. As the Alter Rebbe says, there can't be anything lower than that.
So mind will emotions, huh?
Yeah, so it's mind over emotions, and basically this is the reflection of world. But this is Atzilus, this is the Inyan for itself. So therefore, our patriarchs basically reflect the higher spheres, the first three attributes, Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. Chesed means generosity, Gvura means strictness, Tiferes means beauty, which is basically a blend of the two together. It means the union of pity. Why do we say pity is a blend of generosity and strictness together? Because when it comes to generosity, there are also certain rules to the game. There are certain rules when a person should be generous. For example, you're not going to give charity to someone that you know that person's going to use it for drugs. So you use it for something that'll damage them. So there's a certain logic when you're giving when you're doing the generosity. When Avram, our first father, Avram Avinu, when he was generous to the guests, he wasn't generous just out of his good heart. He was generous with a certain calculation. The reason he was generous is because his purpose was to spread godliness in the world. So after he gave them the meal, and he said to them, now, bless the one that created all this.
Amen.
So when they came and they said, we're not interested, he says, if so, where could you get meat? Where could you get all this stuff here and in this area here? The desert, he says, pay me for everything. So basically it was also logical. And this is how Chassidus teaches us, that even chesed has to be logical. If a person goes loose and just decides to be generous to everything and everybody, it is not healthy either. But on the other hand comes rachamim, pity, and says, you know what, the person doesn't deserve it, but give it to him anyway. Have pity on him.
Pity or mercy?
Mercy, and have mercy on him and give him what he needs. Although we know logically, according to the system, according to everything, to the line of the law, he doesn't deserve it. So therefore, mercy is a blend of generosity together with strictness, but because it blends them together and it connects them together, and it also overlooks sometimes the strictness, although there would be a need for that because it needs to be structured. It can't just be pouring out and without any structure and any logic. So then the Michoel Rebbe continues and says, Yacov is the giver. He is Tiferes. He is the attribute of mercy. Avram and Yitzchak, Avram is chesed, generous. Yitzchak is gvura, is the union of strictness. What does strictness mean? Strictness means removing oneself. Removing oneself from giving, going into the direction of oneself instead of going relating to the world outside of him. A person elevates in himself. By Yitzchak we find, this is the idea of fear. Fear is the idea that it's a union of a person shrinks in himself. When a person is scared, a person is not with people